presentation, you can just click by sitting.
Yeah. Now,
Yeah.
do you want me to introduce John, or do you want to introduce John?
Anything you want. Yeah, that would be better. I think it will be a much better introduction.
I can tell everybody the truth then.
Yeah.
Oh, that's very worrying again.
Make him worried.
Yes, it's always risky. Yeah.
Then we will transfer the laptop on the sofa.
Yeah.
You can just click from there. Yeah.
Okay.
Should we transfer it now?
Well, you can do.
Yeah.
That was save one operation when it starts. Right. Okay.
এটা আমরা খুলে দিয়ে দিব নাকি?
Do you want me to hold the mic? Is that the easiest thing? You've been relocated, John.
All right. Okay. Fair enough.
You are now 2 foot lower than you were before, and so am I. I'm seated.
Okay. Very good.
And let's just check that works. Yes. Right. So I'm back into my usual job as a clicker.
Good man. But you do very well.
What do? Make a mess of it sometimes. It's when I anticipate, and I anticipate wrongly. People are still coming into the room, so we'll give them a few more minutes to come in. Yeah, no, it's very interesting over lunch. Conversations about the challenges which Bangladesh faces.
Yeah, sure.
I should just check, John, we're going to put all the presentations up on the website, or we'd like to.
Yeah.
Are you content for that to happen?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No problem. No problem at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a logistical question, John. If there are questions, we have a roving microphone here, which
Right.
works very well.
Okay.
I guess if you don't hear the question, I repeat the question.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can certainly be heard in the room.
Fine. Very good. Okay.
Right.
back in just 30 seconds, David.
Yeah. Sure, it's your computer. Of course you can use it. Can I take it back to this? That's right, that's right. So just to get okay. That's okay, that's fine. Right, I'm just check that still works. That's lovely. All right, are we ready to go? Ready? Are we ready?
Should you start?
We start? We can start? Okay. John, are you ready to go?
Yes, indeed.
Very good. Well, welcome back, everybody in the hall here in the American International University in Bangladesh. Welcome back to everybody online who is joining us. Those of you who were here this morning heard my introduction to the project, and I announced that this afternoon we would be meeting with Emeritus Professor John Davis, who has been a very important man in this project. Among the many hats he wears, he is a member of the research committee of the Magna Charta Observatory. So he is one of the half dozen who would have sat in judgment of the submissions which we received. He also serves as an ambassador to two of the projects, the one from Dublin, which you heard this morning, and one from Poland, which you will hear tomorrow. Now, in addition to that, he voluntarily took on the role of editing the publication that will emerge from these projects. So he is an extremely busy man, but John is also a very wise man. He has had leadership experience in Australia and in the United Kingdom. He has an immense portfolio of training programs of rectors in Europe and around the world. I don't remember what the latest number is, but I think on the last occasion I introduced John, he'd led management programs or worked with over 70 different countries, but that may have gone up a little bit since. We're very fortunate to have him on this project and also to have him with us this afternoon. Now, what he's going to talk about is this. You heard this morning one of the case studies, and you'll hear 3 more before the end of this event. But also in the book, there will be chapters which extract the learning right across the 6 case studies. And they are chapters that will be presented as a guide, a reference work for universities that are not doing as well as they want to in engaging with society. Now, what John is going to do this afternoon, he's going to share from that chapter and say a few more things. So, John, thank you so much for joining us, and let's now go to you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much. The first thing I think is to say apologies that I'm not there in person with you. I was hoping to be there, but various sort of travel conflicts made that rather difficult. But it's a very great pleasure to engage with you on the air, so to speak, as a second best. It's fairly apparent, I think, that the discussions which we've had so far have been very productive, and I'd like to very much congratulate the university for having the foresight to put this programme on for us. We are very greatly indebted to you. As David mentioned, my main job in this particular session is to do an overview of the cases. Not so much in terms of the substantive content of the particular changes which are being advanced and implemented, in other words, the what, but more in terms of the how. How have the universities gone about it? What approaches have they used? What's worked and what hasn't worked? What's got in the way? And various other things of that particular type. And in doing this, I'll sort of touch on one or two conceptual frameworks which we've developed during this particular exercise as well, which hopefully will be helpful to all of you in terms of understanding conceptually where we are, and in particular to interpret the various different forms of reality which there are in the cases and indeed in other examples up and down the planet as well. So it's a very generic challenge which we've got here with this particular topic, and it's been a very great pleasure working with colleagues. So that's basically all I'd like to say in preamble. Now the agenda for this afternoon, next one, David, will be something like this. We'll say a little bit about the nature and scope of social responsibility in the universities as we've uncovered them during our investigations. We'll say something about the factors which relate to the university settings and the nature as well of relationships with external partners, because the whole point about social responsibility is you can't do it on your own. You've got to do it with groups of partners, and I'll go into that in some detail in a moment or so. The third thing which I'd like to dwell on is the fact that there are some factors which seem to be absolutely crucial in terms of enabling these initiatives to happen. And to put it in a slightly reverse way, these factors, of course, if they are not present, will certainly inhibit progress as well. And so it's important, I think, to identify what these are and how they operate in the cases. The next thing I think would then be to say something about the way in which our activities evolve and mature, and what are the factors involved in this, of which risk, of course, will be quite an important element. And then the last thing I think is to say a little bit about the external and internal impact as well. So that's roughly the line which we will follow, and I'll dip in and out of examples from the cases as they are. So if we can go on to the next one, David, after preamble. Yeah, that's the one. And the next one again. Next one again. That's it. So one of the things I think which we've been very well aware of course, is that social engagement and social responsibility and responsiveness and so on is something which is not a uniform concept at all. And one of the things which we have identified is that there is the sort of social responsibility which is born out of a crisis in society, for which the university sees its role as being helping to provide solutions, approaches, and resolution. So it's what I've called a crisis-induced social responsibility. And you will certainly hear cases which describe what went on here with reference to Wrocław and Vilnius as well. Now, what are the characteristics of this? Well, the whole essence, of course, about a crisis is that it's quite quick. You get very fast dynamics, many of which are outside the university control in society, in terms of political environment, the demographic environment, the economic environment, and so forth. So all sorts of things emerge here, if you like, which demand some sort of response. And the fact that, of course, that it's very fast moving does affect our ability to provide services and approaches to society as quickly as we would like. Our response rates are often not quite as quick as the unfolding crisis. But what it does mean, of course, is that we're into short-term fundamental action as quick as we can. And this is in the context of an institution and society which may be in shock as a result of this particular crisis. And I think the developments in the Ukraine, of course, have been classic examples of that. Where we get shock in a university, then there are ambiguities. We don't fully understand what the crisis, to start with, is all about. We've not got any ready-made solutions to it because it's quite new. There's a lot of emotional disturbance, I think. We're not quite sure where we are. And moreover, we tend to be quite unprepared as well. So the point is, of course, that it's inevitable that shock will be the initial feeling. But what we are moving towards, of course, is to accommodate us as university people and our colleagues in society to this shock which is taking place and beginning to develop solutions as a natural progression. Now, very often, of course, a crisis is a one-off thing. But what we've tended to find is that it introduces all sorts of interesting possibilities which can lead to sort of permanent changes within society and the university as well. And therefore, I think we tend to look at these sort of things as being means by which we can embed innovations which we develop within the institution in the future. So we're never quite the same again. After this, we don't go back to square one. We build on where we've actually got to. So the old normality is something which we don't go back to. Now, inevitably, of course, because these things are new, then we haven't got any programmed responses. We can't pick down a procedure off the shelf which is ready-made, or a policy which is ready-made. So we've got to be creative. And part of the role of management is to try and move us in a creative direction. So the whole point is, therefore, that crisis management is something which is really quite important element in this business of social engagement and social responsibility in a crisis situation. And this replaces our existing maintenance arrangements. It challenges our existing attitudes, behaviours, structures, processes and functions. And inevitably, of course, because we haven't got ready-made solutions, we've got to rely on our innate values and instinctive reactions and our fundamental beliefs to try to sort things out. So that's the first one. I feel it's crisis-induced social responsibility. And our cases do reflect, I think, how we've gone about responding there. Now, the next one, David, is social responsibility, but as a long-term conscious systematic policy development of the university. And this we particularly find in Dublin, Bangladesh, most certainly, Macedonia as well. And this is where we get a long-term commitment by the university to engage with society. It's a strategic thing, it's strong, it's collective, it's intense, it's deep, and it's not just located in a part of the university. Now, it's certainly about a response to environmental trends, and it allows us to express our internal values. But it's systematic in the sense that we identify these trends quite coherently. They're not necessarily forced on us. We identify what they are, we interpret what the signals actually mean, and we may very well fulfill a leadership function in society as well. And this is important, I think, because response to external trends demonstrates to those who need it demonstrated that we are indispensable to society. And if we're indispensable to society, there shouldn't be any doubt that we need funding and support from a variety of different places. So it's part of our long-term credibility development. And the third thing, therefore, which follows from that is that we do see an evolutionary development of mission, engagement strategy, policy formation across a whole range of things, and sustainable structures as well. So this is permanent shift in the nature of the university. And the permanent means, of course, that we do bed down new structures, we institutionalize them, we create incentives, we influence behavior on the very long term. And this, on the whole, will tend at its best to be generic in scope. It might just be limited in the first instance to a particular project, but usually it tends to be generic. So it tends to be transformatory in that sense as far as the university is concerned. It applies right the way down through the university and across the university as well. So go next one, David. But these two things, although we can certainly detect differences between them, they're not necessarily incompatible, not necessarily. And so we found in particularly the Wrocław case, I think, a sort of conceptualization that we are not just talking about management by objectives here in a systematic classical sense, but we're talking about management by values as well. So management by values and management by objectives come together. Management by objectives is much more technical in nature. We need to have ways by which we can systematically attack a particular problem or an opportunity. Whereas management by values, I think, is the series of beliefs and cultural behaviors which we undertake in order to make things happen. And this is part of the genetic makeup of the institution. So the two can quite easily go together, perhaps in sequence. It may get the management by values first, the instant reaction, but eventually over time, we do need to systematize things. The final point I think to mention here is that we cannot, of course, engage in social responsibility unless we've got effective partnerships. And these are with all sorts of different types of organizations, which I'll mention further on. But these are important because it means that to achieve change in relation to the problem in society, we need to share values, share commitment as an essential dimension in this. So what we'll be looking at later on is the types of partnerships which we've got, which come out of the cases, and also very important, the dynamics of those partnerships as well. How should they behave? What's the most optimal way by which we can conceive of these? So next one, David, if you would mind. So when we're looking at this whole business then of social responsibility and social responsiveness, it's perhaps important to differentiate two things. Responsibility is one thing, and this means, if you like, accepting a certain range of motivations for doing something, because it's either sort of practically important we do it, it may be important in terms of our survival, it may be important in terms of the survival of elements of society as well. But it's essentially about the why we do things, the motivation for doing things. Responsiveness, on the other hand, is slightly different, because this is about the means which we use to practically realize the motivations which we just mentioned. And I think the two actually do go together. It's not much good in being just responsible if you are not going to be responsive at the same time in very practical terms. The second thing is that our cases do reveal a whole lot of very different issues and opportunities potentially to be addressed as well. We've got warfare, we've got invasion, we've got migration, social deprivation comes in, societal discourse comes into this, the improvement of the region in which we are in economically, socially, and so on. All these range of issues are therefore part and parcel of what we mean by social responsibility. And the thing is that they may very well be realized in the core functions of the university. So we don't do it in a separate sort of way. We are socially responsible in relation to our education, our research, our R&D, personal services within the university, like HR or internationalization and so forth. But it may also be in terms of off-campus provision as well for learning, for the co-creation of knowledge with our industrial partners. So next one, David. So what we find, I think, is that the manifestation could very well be in terms of looking at our existing activities and simply adapting these for new circumstances. So in Macedonia, for example, we see there that you take a course like a teacher training course, which is in existence, but modify it quite considerably in order to deal with the societal issue of bullying on a fairly large scale amongst the children and the child population. So that's adapting existing things. But we may very well want to produce new instruments as well. And these would include things like lifelong learning, targeted community provision of education and training. We may develop off-campus e-provision. We may get into the whole question of co-creation of knowledge with a whole lot of people we haven't worked with before. And this comes out very well in the community engaged research, which the Dublin case does extremely well. So flexibility, I think, is a thing here. And it's not just about sort of focusing what we do in a very narrow area. It's a question of using everything which we've got in order to try and figure out how we can best serve society. So social responsibility stuff is not in a box. It's permeating as an attitude and as a frame of approaching opportunities and problems. So next one, David. In all this lot, of course, and this is where our project started, we're concerned with values. And we have the Living Values project in MCO, which we spend a lot of time conceptualizing, and that's available. I'm sure David will point you in the directions of the guidelines which he and I produced for this. But values, of course, can be implicit, but the whole essence, of course, of social responsibility is that we make them explicit. So we know exactly what we're talking about. People can affiliate with them in a very public way. And this sense, of course, they need to be real values in that people will behave according to them, rather than just rhetoric, which appears in the university propaganda statements and mission and so forth. So the point about them is that they should be explicit, they should be real. And it's not my job here to say what they are, because these, I think, are very well exhibited in the cases which you are finding out about. But what they are, I think, is ethical and moral statements which are tested with our partners in society. And together we reiterate them on a continuing basis. We celebrate them, we make them visible, and therefore this means that sustainable manifestations of the values in practice become very important. And some of the terminology we use here, of course, is really very important indeed, such as community engaged research in Dublin, for example. So management by values, therefore, is very much the basis of crisis management, but it's also the basis of management by objectives, in the sense that we take certain values, principles, desired outcomes, and work these through into more stable and long-term settings. But the whole point about values, of course, is that people should feel them from within. Values are not imposed. Values are things which mean people can self-start. They can respond to circumstances in a very creative way. They don't have to be told necessarily. They can respond in a much more creative way rather than rely on a command structure. So I think we've skipped something like about 20 pages, David?
What's happened?
We should be on number 11 now.
We're back on number 11, but it's,
Number 11.
yeah.
Okay,
the
so
final idea.
number 11, the big heading there is factors relating to university settings. So one of the things I think, which is, it's not on, I can't see it on the screen at the minute.
Is that better?
It's blank at the minute. On the screen behind you, it's blank.
Let's try this. Yes, please.
That's the one.
Oh, yeah. Right.
It's very good.
Sorry about that.
Okay, that's okay. Now, the thing about this, I think, is that we're looking at the nature of university settings, because all the cases are in quite different sort of geographical settings, economic, social, and all the rest of it. And therefore, the communities of partners we might work with are different as well. So if we go on to the next one, David. Next one.
Let's see if this works. No. Ah, you are.
That's the one. That's the one. Yeah. So the first thing is, if you like, we can see different types of regional characteristics, and these may be because of their location, their accessibility within a country, their historical prosperity, their current prosperity or not, as the case may be, the buoyancy of the economy, the buoyancy of society, the stability or degree of turbulence in the region, economic, social, political, and so forth, the industrial and economic profiles of the region and the demand for labour, the extent of social disadvantage, the gulfs, of course, which there are in society, and this is now, becoming very apparent right across the planet, even in relatively, stable sort of Nordic countries experiencing considerable volumes of migration, of course, which raise questions about our ability to cope in society with housing and various other things like that. But also, I think, the extent to which the fact that we are international organizations means that we can be agents of growth within the particular region as well. So the thing is, of course, that what we can do, or what we should be doing, is very much dependent on what the region is throwing up for us in the way of opportunities and problems. So what is evident in Dhaka, in our splendid case study in Dhaka, is really sort of quite different, I think, from what we find in somewhere like Dublin, for example. The whole circumstance is a bit different. But nonetheless, of course, and if we go on the next one, David, we have got considerable variation, therefore, in our engagement potential. And therefore, we don't take things off the shelf in this sense. We figure it through as to what it needs to be. And the other thing I think which is important here is that if we're talking about interinstitutional partnerships, then these can be at different sort of levels. We can have partnerships within the region. We can have partnerships nationally. We can have partnerships internationally as well. And there are obviously sensitivities involved in each of these things. But the thing is, of course, that partnership is something which is now not just a local thing. It's something which is really much broader than that, globalization being what it is. So if you go on to the next one, David, what I've tried to do here is to say that when we are partnering with various societal groups or whatever, for the purposes of being responsible to and with them, there's different types. First of all, there's those partners in society who are consumers or users of our service. And these may be adult learners, for example. These may be normal students who've got a particular sort of problem or a particular set of issues which a university can help with. They may be companies, they may be governmental agencies, they may be voluntary organizations who find our services and our intellectual property, if you like, has been very, very important indeed. So there's the consumers and users. The second type of partner we see across the cases is people who are co-producers of knowledge, co-producers of our intellectual property. So we work with industry. In Dublin's case, we work with all sorts of individuals and organizations who are also interested in doing research in particular themes for various practical purposes. And the point I think to bear in mind is that here we're not looking upon the university in terms of knowledge transfer out. What we are doing is looking at the university in terms of knowledge exchange between ourselves and other organizations who've got a great deal of knowledge which they can bring into the equation. So they are hosts of expertise in the same way as we are hosts of expertise as well. So these are partners who are very important indeed, particularly in terms of economic regeneration and so on. The third type of partner are patrons who provide us with legitimacy. These may be governments, of course, regional government, national governments, city governments, and so on. These patrons, of course, will say, yeah, these universities looking at these sorts of issues, and this is very, very important for us indeed. We thoroughly approve. And it may very well be, of course, that these sorts of organizations will also provide us funds as well. They might provide us with funds as well, even better. So you get regional development agencies, of course, which tend to do this. Foundations tend to do it as well. Then we got a fourth group, which is facilitating organizations which build alliances. They have access, if you like, to all sorts of other people. So we've got chambers of commerce, for example, here. We've got things like regional development agencies, which are pretty good in terms of accessing other partners who we can build in as well. And one of the key functions of a rector or a university president is the extent to which he or she can access these other influentials, if you like, within society. So the point to bear in mind, therefore, I think, is that we may very well find here that we've got partners in universities as well, HE partners within or outside the region. And I think international partners can often be very helpful indeed in bringing in expertise into a region which we may or may not have. But the whole point about, of course, these partners is that they do have a lot of clout, if you like, which they can contribute to us. And this comes out very strongly in the discussions. So if you go on to the next one, David, one of the things, of course, which we really comes out of the cases very well indeed, is the fact that our partners are not homogeneous. They do not behave or think in the same way. They have got agendas which differ from each other. They've got agendas which differ from us. And therefore, of course, the point is that we've somehow got to have an engagement where we are all going to gain from the partnerships related to sorting out a particular problem or opportunity in society. So differentiated approaches are inevitable. But one of the things I'd just like to mention at this stage is that this is where I think the rector or the university president is really pretty important, because he or she, I think, would need to get a very good sense of what the time frame is for this initiative which we are working at. You know, is it for the rest of eternity, or is it a finite time period, or whatever? Because he or she will need to activate the university or parts of the university. He or she will need to create alliances with the partners outside as well. And so the rector, I think it's fair to say, is very much the manager of an assembly process. If the rector, vice-chancellor, perceives there to be an issue, how does he or she put together an alliance of people who can work together in that way? So this is one of the important functions of a rector, if you like, is the person who can create these alliances. The second function of the rector, I suppose, would be to be a leader of the initiative up front in society and within the university. Not necessarily in minute detail, but in terms of setting the scene, making sure the right policies are in existence, but may take a personal interest in it as well. But the third function of a rector, I think, would be somebody who facilitates, somebody who can point out to the fact that this thing we do in this society is great, but we've got all sorts of problems within the university which make it very difficult for the university to respond. And I'll come to these points in a moment or so. So the rector is a facilitator, a policy maker, and the manager of an assembly process. And this comes out very well indeed in virtually all the cases which we've seen. Now, the next thing I think which is important is the fact that putting together a partnership is not easy. And I've all this little diagram here which seemed to me to indicate, roughly the issues involved. So across the top, you can see there's a spectrum. We've got on the left-hand side partnerships which are relatively immature, lack sophistication, lack systematization, but they're willing. On the right-hand side, what I maintain there is that you get some alliances or partnerships which are relatively mature. They're pretty systematic, they're pretty sophisticated. But inevitably, of course, when we start the partnership business, we start on the left-hand side, normally on the left-hand side. We can't move straight to the right-hand side, without any stop in between, because the cluster, the regional partnership needs to evolve. And it needs to evolve, first of all, if you like, number one, by making sure we understand our respective terminologies. We understand our expectations. The second thing is, if we can do this, then we can describe together all the relevant elements which we need to consider. The third thing which we need to do is to feel free to analyze all these various elements in terms of their effectiveness. Do they work or not? The fourth thing to do is to be able to confront problems. If we perceive, or rather, if society perceives the university is pretty well inert and is not really very responsive, we need for them to criticize us and say, this is not working. You need to sort yourselves out. If we can't get hold of information for research projects in industry, we need to tell industry as well. So the whole thing, therefore, becomes a means of being able to confront problems, criticize constructively, and recreate things. And this takes us to the final point on the right-hand side, where if we can do all these things, then the partnership can function pretty well. It can do things, it can get on with things. So that's quite important from that point of view. So if you go to the next one, David. So one of the things, of course, with this is that we do need autonomy to be able to be quickly responsive and creative in generating solutions outside the box. We can't rely on the heavy hand of state bureaucracy or internal bureaucracy to do this. We do need to have academic freedom and responsibility to be creative. And these are two different things. Academic responsibility, which means a motivation to do these things as an instinctive thing. But we also need to have some institutional autonomy in the way of our governance, the ability to design organizations within the university, autonomy in finance, autonomy in various aspects of HR, autonomy in academic regulations and design, so that we can start up a new degree program if we need to very, very quickly and don't have to wait for 2 years before arcane processes to work their way through. And the freedom as well to determine our research agendas with our partners. So institutional autonomy from government, I think, and working with government, because this responsibility goes with this as well, not to be destructive with our autonomy. This is really quite important. So the thing is, of course, that we can very easily see a clash of cultures when we are working in the social responsibility domain. We need to be creative, possibly entrepreneurial, whereas, of course, within the university, we've got bureaucracy and we've got collegial practices, which are not altogether helpful from time to time. And this brings me on to my next point, David, which is that what we found looking across the cases is that there are some internal instruments which get in the way of what we are doing because they're so slow and cumbersome and irrelevant and designed for different purposes. Or there may be some internal instruments which are really very good at facilitating what we want to do. And I'll just mention a couple of these so we can see what's in there. Oh, something's happened here.
Got another voice online.
Another voice, right.
Not sure where it's coming from.
Это мы должны забрать его просто. Или как?
Если он потеряется, то не должны забрать.
It's something about some.
200.
Будь ласка, вимкніть мікрофон.
А вот.
Try again, John. I've put slide 19 up.
Okay, that's great. Thanks very much. That's it. Okay. So what are these factors? Well, the first factor, if you like, is responsiveness and responsibility being sustainable. That is to say, values, behavior associated with the values, processes and structures should be sustainable over time. A lot of little ad hoc solutions working independently of each other don't really work properly. So we probably need to think about embedding values along the lines which we've been talking about, ensuring through a lot of hard discussion that people accept the sort of motivations for doing these sort of things. The second thing, I think, is what we're doing in our societal projects should have some connection with the academic heart of the university. It's not a separate thing, on some distant sort of island, as it were. It's really part and parcel of the academic heart. So it probably should therefore be reflective in responsive mainstream provision. Our mainstream education, our mainstream research ought to reflect what we are trying to achieve in societal terms. Come to this later on. The faculties need to have ownership of this as a major institutional mission. There, I think, is the relationship between academic and practice. And this is, of course, particularly evident and possible when we've got a number of professional schools. But it can work for humanities just as well. There's no doubt whatever in my mind that if you've got a department, a faculty of humanities, it can be very much addressing, a lot of the social problems which we have in our respective societies. Now, there may be a need for some differentiation of mechanisms, but we'll mention that. But the main thing is that the academic heart of the university beats, to the rhythm of social awareness, social engagement. Next one, David. There's a lot in the field of personnel practice and policy, which may be irrelevant, which maybe not be relevant. And I think a lot of the stuff we do in society, of course, is non-traditional. It requires different approaches to contracts, staff contracts. It may require different reward mechanisms for promotion and so on. It may require a different academic year or no academic year at all. We work right through the whole year. It may be that we need a lot of training in order to engage in new opportunities for staff. And it may very well be, of course, that we need new career tracks as well. So the point is, of course, I won't go into this in detail now, but there's a whole stack of things which we found out in the cases where our personnel policy doesn't really facilitate what we might be trying to do in the social sense. The next one, if you like, is financial practices. Now, on the whole, I think a lot of us have got an over-reliance on state funding to provide for non-traditional social responsibility operations. Now, this basically, I suppose, means, that we are subsidizing a lot of social responsibility activities from our state teaching budget, for example. How long can we go on doing that? So what it means, if you like, is that universities would probably need to search for diversified income sources, diversified, buoyant and durable income sources, not just rely on government. And a lot of the finance, of course, may very well be provided by our partner organizations anyway, or patrons, if you like. So if we moved on from there, next one, David, we'd see, for example, the need for government sustainable funding to deal with a lot of these big social problems. Is government funding sensitive enough to make available, project grants and so forth, and project budgets for these things? We probably need flexible costing and pricing mechanisms. We probably need to have means by which we can carry money over from one financial year to another, or shift expenditure from one heading of a budget to another heading of the budget. And then, of course, there's the whole question of intellectual property in the way of community-related research as well. So the point about this, of course, is that a lot of the things which we're talking about here are really concerned with being entrepreneurial and the extent to which we've got the freedom to be entrepreneurial in all sorts of different ways. So the next one, David, is saying that we need to have a very good, flexible supporting organization for this type of work. Now, we've talked already about the role of the president, but the board of the university, we found, is really pretty important in giving its backing to a lot of these projects which are coming up under this heading of social responsibility. Boards are often very good at interpreting the signals from society and feeding these back into the university. Boards ought to be monitoring what we are doing for society in a fairly coherent way. But boards, of course, are very good in terms of accessing the contributions and the support of political and other economic influential people as well. So one of the things I think which has been missing in a number of our cases is the role of the board. And this is one of the things which we're trying to fill out now in the next stage of the project. The third thing there, if you like, is shared and distributed leadership. It's not just the rector. It's a lot of other people involved across and down the organisation. And vice presidents and the portfolios of vice presidents ought to reflect this in terms of the particular aspects of outward-looking mission which they are responsible for. So it may be a vice president for regional development. It may be a vice president for particular aspects of social policy, for example, like what we do as a university for migrants and so forth. It means that we probably got some external facing support units for providing some of these services. And this comes out very well in the Dublin case when we're looking at the provision of community engaged research and learning there. But we've also, of course, got units within the institution which facilitate. And these would be things like research offices, technology transfer offices, lifelong learning units, and so on and so on. Another aspect of organisation is cooperative project groups, which a number of the cases refer to as living laboratories. And that's a lovely phrase, because it does imply, of course, that together with our groups in society, we are living an experiment. We are undertaking all sorts of innovative things, and we're learning about it together. And this is really, very, very important indeed. And then the final thing, of course, is that we've got our formal partnerships. And some of these, of course, may be legal entities like consortia and so on. Others may be sort of looser, but nonetheless, I think you may very well find that partnerships with other institutions will fall under this heading as well. So as we sort of move, if you like, from the sort of crisis, from the one-off creativity, as it were, to solve an immediate problem, inevitably, if we're going to be sustainable, we've probably got to sort out the extent to which HR, finance, organisation, academic organisation, and so on is supporting this as a general movement and as a direction. In other words, it's fairly fundamental changes. And the last point under this one, David, number 6, is to say that we probably will need to revisit how we go about strategy and planning. We've talked about conventional strategic planning in stable conditions, and we know what that looks like. Very sort of systematic, lay down stages and cycles, top down, and so on. Whereas management by values in a near crisis situation is really a combination of up and down. And I think what comes out very nicely from the Wrocław case is the fusion of the two approaches, which I think is something which has got a lot of mileage in it, in terms of where we might go from here. Okay, let's move on, if we may, David. Now, one of the things I think which I'm quite conscious of is the fact that in this new situation we find ourselves in, there are some risk issues involved. And we can look at this along 2 dimensions. One of which, if you like, is, if you go back, David, we've lost you.
Go back or go forward?
The diagram, the one we were on.
Yeah.
That's the one, thanks. Good. So one of these is on the top line, if you like. We have existing partnerships which we know all about, and we may or may not work well with them. But as we get into the social responsibility arena and doing all sorts of new and exciting things, there are likely to be other new partners, new users, new consumers, which we access as well. Some of these we don't know much about at all. Some of them are a closed book. We're not quite sure how they behave. We're not quite sure what their agendas are. So the point is, of course, if we've got new consumers, then this might very well add risk, to a relatively comfortable set of relationships. And if we look at the vertical axis, we've got our existing activities, but if we expand these activities quite considerably, then it may mean, of course, that we are getting into new areas of activity for the institution, which we haven't really got much expertise about or experience about, and therefore it's an unknown quantity. It's experimental, so there may be risk expanding, of course, as we go down the vertical axis. There may be risk expanding as we go along the top one as well. Now, if you're in the northwest corner, if I can put it that, the risk is relatively low. That's fairly straightforward. If, on the other hand, we do entirely new things for the institution or in very different ways, and we do it with new groups of people, this is high risk as well. And therefore, I think we might very well find there are some problems which we might find in that particular way. And of course, the more we do with new people, the more new things we do, then the more we are engaging in risk type situations. Then if you go to the next one, David, sorry, the next one again, beg your pardon. What we may find, of course, is that this is closely related to the evolving maturity of our responses to social responsible agendas as well. So on the top left hand, the northwest corner, if you like, we're not doing an awful lot, and it's very ad hoc what we do. And this is often the case when we start. If we're doing a huge amount of work, and it's quite complex as well, then we're in the southeast corner. And the danger, of course, of this is that if we expand too much along the top line, then we could be in the danger of being over-bureaucratic. We invent so many rules and regulations for non-traditional learning that it becomes a disincentive to do it rather than an incentive. It ceases to become supportive. And similarly, of course, things can get rather complex as well. So the more complex things are, then of course, the more difficult it is to cope. And if we've got things which are a vast number of new things going on and very bureaucratic things going on, then we are in trouble. So what I think we've avoided this quite well with the 6 cases we've got at the minute. But I know of other cases where they've gone berserk on both dimensions, and therefore they've ground themselves, into inertia because they just can't cope. They've overreached, and that's not altogether helpful. Okay, so the final thing then, David, in the next slide is what have we observed, and the next one, sorry, are the external and internal impacts. Now, as far as external impacts are concerned, we have observed quite considerable consequences of a very favourable nature in all the cases which we've dealt with. And these will have been described to you in the presentations which you are having, this couple of days. And it's very, very impressive indeed. We'll say more about this in the book and when we disseminate. But this is really rather important. And they might, of course, be outcomes for all sorts of different people. Outcomes for social partners we're working with. There might be outcomes for individuals like the women in Bangladesh, which we are educating in impoverished areas, that sort of thing, in terms of housing in the slum areas in Dhaka and so forth. There might be outcomes as well for those patron groups in society who have got faith in our ability to do things as well. And of course, for a lot of these, they are really quite keen on these because they can demonstrate that their faith in us was justified. And that's great. That's great. But it may also be, of course, that we've got a long-term impact, that some of the societal issues which generated our initiatives in the first place are gradually being resolved. And I know of a number of countries, for example, where there's been quite a lot of migration just recently, been concerted effort by universities and their partners to do something about it. And some of these issues are being resolved, which is wonderful to see. But of course, the thing as well is that the more we can demonstrate impact externally, then the more credibility there is for the university as a society-oriented contribution, as it were. There's credibility for the partners because they've invested in it, and there's credibility for the alliances with other universities and other partners as well. But all this, of course, depends very much on the importance of monitoring, evaluation, and adjusting. And as far as we're concerned, I think on the project, this is one of the next stages which we've got to probably sharpen up a little bit about, is to monitor the impact of a lot of the stuff which we've been doing. Now, the next one, David, says words about the internal impacts on universities themselves. And this is something which comes out very, very well indeed from most of the cases. It can be summarized, I think, in the following way, which is to say, there's certainly evidence of an evolution of university values, of culture, and the associated operating characteristics of the university. The whole thing is behaving quite differently. And of course, leadership may very well be behaving differently as well. Instead of being top-down, it becomes facilitated. It becomes much more bottom-up, much more engaging, much more creative, and so forth. We can see impacts, for example, in terms of the educational provision. We can see the way in which fairly traditional degree programs are becoming much more flexible to encompass the participation of student bodies who've not been represented in higher education in the past. We can see the development of new paradigms of learning and assessment for new student clientele who are in different circumstances, who do not necessarily feel able to come to the campus, but we can, as the Bangladesh case demonstrates very well, we can educate them in local situations there. So there's all sorts of things, I think, which we see happening in terms of the evolution of the educational provision. The third thing, or fourth, whatever it is, we can see is the evolution and the way in which we regard knowledge and research provision. And the emphasis will tend to be here, of course, much more on co-creation of knowledge and co-creation of newer ways of resolving societal programs through inventions and so on and so on. So knowledge exchange replaces knowledge transfer. Co-creation, working with industry, etc., becomes the way to do it. And this has got huge implications, of course, on reward systems within the university. It's got huge ramifications for the type of research which we do. If we had time, we talk about difference between mode 1 and mode 2 research. One is academically inspired. The other one is inspired by problems and conscience. So there's huge development there. It comes out very well in the Dublin case. The next thing, of course, which we see as an impact on the universities is their capacity for developing and sustaining partnerships. And they can be institutional partnerships or societal partnerships. They can be regional in nature, they can be international in nature. And I think this is really very good because none of us in universities has got all the expertise which we need to deal with these vast social problems and climatic problems and etc. With which we are confronted at the moment. So partnerships, I think, is one of the great impacts of the sort of movement which we're talking about here. And then finally, I think we've got the whole question of internal organization. And we've already talked about that. Academic organization tends to evolve. Non-academic organization tends to evolve as well. Now, with the external and internal impacts, as far as the cases are concerned, it's still quite early, I think, to assess, what the real impact has been, because these sort of things take time. We're dealing with evolution here rather than revolution. And if we're dealing with evolution, we've got to give ourselves a certain amount of time to monitor what's been going on and, of course, to try and figure out whether things worked or didn't work. But as far as we've got in the drafts of the cases to date, they do give great reassurance that the impacts have been both external and internal, and is a heck of a lot more to come. And I really look forward to working with our institutions, in the next period. So that's basically it. Sorry, I've raced to that so quickly. But next one, David. So I'd like to say thank you once more, to the case study authors and the groups within the institutions, and also I think to confirm that what the project has certainly shown is that social responsibility, social responsiveness is confirmed, I think, very much as a significant agent of societal development and improvement, but also in terms of institutional change and development as well. Both sides have altered. So thank you very much, the American International University of Bangladesh, which I hope to come to at some point or other. It'll be a great experience for me, I'm absolutely sure. Thank you for a very inspiring, instructive and moving case study. Thank you for hosting this conference, and I hope very much we'll continue our collaboration. And thank you all for listening to me. I hope there's none of you fallen asleep to any great extent. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
John, thank you. Before I just sum up, may I ask, are there any questions from the audience? I'm sorry to colleagues online, we don't have a facility to take your questions live, but you can email them and we will get the answers to you. Any questions in the hall? There is a question about 15 rows back.
Thank you very much for counting that right. Congratulations, David. That was a very enlightening presentation, actually. I'm Dr. Zahid. I work here as a registrar of this university, but I'll be wearing my other hat. I'm also a research fellow at the University of Reading, probably where you're based in England. So I have actually two intriguing questions. I was following your lecture from my room prior to coming here online. And this is related to your point, we are on a crisis-induced social responsibility mode. And you actually also promised that we will be talking a little bit about reality also. So let me give you one reality here in Bangladesh context. In that crisis-driven social responsibility mode, we have practical examples where university lecturers or professors or academics or broadly educationists come out with statements as part of a social responsibility for an issue, which is also sometimes politically biased. I'm taking a position.
Yeah.
It's sort of legitimizing a particular position, which in one sense you could say, I mean, this is also in some way intellectual tribalism, as Pinker would call it from Harvard. I was just thinking whether should as an institution, university, should it have a institutional neutrality on position on issues such as big social political issues, and not encourage or not take any side, rather sort of allow open debates on it without making any official announcement. So this is a first thing. I mean, should the university have this?
Could I suggest we take that question first before we go to your...
Just a quick one. The next one is very quick one.
Okay.
This is related, a very intriguing point that you make. Management by values as opposed to management by objective. A very intriguing one. But just one quick intuitive question, that objectives are supposed to be derived from values. Now, if you have management by values, it also opens up opportunity of some kind of dependency of value enforcers of the management, of which value he or she is enforcing on whom. Sort of discrimination is implicit, because, as you know, nothing is value neutral in the social world. So how do we do that? I quite like the idea that management by value has more potential to improve the societal condition. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so much indeed. Two very, very, very good questions. Can I deal with the second one first? It partly, I think, goes back to how the values were generated. One of the things I think which is not terribly helpful is if the president or somebody or other or senior management group sits down solemnly for a couple of days and works out what it reckons the values of the institution are, proclaims these to anybody who care to listen, institutionalizes it in some sort of banners across the university and publicity material and all the rest of it, which very often means that they are enforcing something which they themselves have created. Now, the point about values, I think, and how they are generated in technical terms, is that values really should be a collectively generated set of principles. And in some of the cases which we've worked with in this project and others as well, the first stage, I think, would be to try and figure out from faculty and administrators as a whole, by all sorts of different mechanisms, and these are indicated in the guidelines I produced for the Living Values project, to try and figure out by a variety of mechanisms, focus groups and various other things, what would seem to be the first trawl of what the underlying behaviours of the institution were. I think there's a difference between what they are when you start this project and what they might evolve into, because we then go into the next stage, which is, well, are we sort of content with these as an institution across the board in various constituency groups, or can these be recreated? So the question, I think, of management by values assumes, from my point of view, that the values have been collectively generated, collectively tested, before they are actually put into operation. Now, I think it's legitimate in that sense, if they have been collectively developed, for the senior management of the institution to be, you use the word enforced. I can see what you're getting at. Certainly implemented. It's their job to see that the values are implemented, and that then ought to figure, of course, in the things like academic policy, HR policy, financial policy, and the way in which Senate and the board behaves, and so on and so on. So I think I agree very much in principle with what he's saying, but it really does depend on how the thing was developed in the first place. And if we're trying to use these to detect what the implicit values are and get people to make explicit how they see the institution, then I think that's a much better starting off point. Going back to your first question, I mean, this is a really, really important one. And I certainly see where you're coming from, because there's obviously huge debates, taking place across the university world, in the certainly US, in the UK, parts of Europe as well, Australia, about cancellation culture. the fact that if particular people hold particular views which are quasi-political, should they have the right to express them, or basically should they be kept down? Very difficult one, and I don't think I've got any answer which is better than anybody else's. In terms of where university presidents have been going, I think what they've been trying to do is to differentiate between values and ideas which university individuals might want to express as personal views, from secondly, positions which emanate from data-based research which they've done. Thirdly, I think from positions which are the official positions of the university. I think it's quite dangerous in some ways for universities in very volatile political situations to have very strongly stated political views on one side or the other. Although I can certainly appreciate very much, how that can very well develop. For example, David and I have been working this last week with two senior vice presidents from the University of Bethlehem, who are constantly under siege, from the national authorities in Israel, in terms of bombardment, arrests, and various other things like that. And I can very well appreciate, why they are making statements they do. But I think it's a tricky one, because I think we have got to distinguish between an institutional view, which I think probably ought to be much more neutral, compared with individual views, which is really part of academic freedom. But it also ought to be accompanied by academic responsibility as well. If people do make certain opinions known, then is the responsibility of what consequences actually do follow from that. I think this is a really very, very important question, and I think we need to have another 3 days conference to talk it through. So happy to come to Bangladesh for that, most certainly. Thank you.
You're absolutely right, John. This is a huge question, and you may know that there's been a lot of controversy. You will know, John, colleagues in the audience may or may not. There's a huge controversy in the United States at the moment about what rectors will allow universities to say, in fear of the consequences from the Trump government. And that kind of fear and concern is spreading around the world, particularly when there's any connection through partnerships with American universities. And some universities now have policies that they will not comment as a university. They will, of course, publish their research, they will do the proper thing and so on, but there will not be a comment. So watch this space. It's very much developing. It's a very hot topic. Any other questions? In which case, John, thank you. You have been hugely comprehensive. I put up just a couple of lines this morning about the objectives of this research. And what you've shared this afternoon, I think, demonstrates that we've gone a very long way towards achieving those objectives. Friends here heard what Mary shared this morning from the Dublin position. And tomorrow we will have the opportunity to listen in detail to Poland and to Lithuania, and of course to the project of the American University here. And it will be fascinating for colleagues when they hear those projects to think back to what you've shared with us this afternoon. So thank you very much indeed, and let's give you a final round of applause. And tea, I believe, is outside where we had it this morning. And are there any other announcements to be made about tomorrow?
Just let me thank John again for making time out of his pretty busy schedule. I'm sure he's working on the book and so many other projects. So thank you so much for making time and being here. On a personal note, I must add that our project, our MCO ambassador is Dr. Ella Ritchie. But when our case was going through, John has been one of the reviewers and he has sent us so many reviews. And I was just telling in the morning to Mary that what we started and with the case and what we ended up, both Ella and John has a huge contribution to our case development. Whatever we have come and whatever we have ended up, huge credit goes to both Ella and John because of their, I would say, very thorough and very detailed and very insightful feedback that had actually made the case a lot better. Thank you so much, John. Thank you so much for
Thank you very much. Thank you.
your time and all you have done for us. I think for our today's session, we have a campus tour. So we have our guests. So we would have a campus tour by our students. Our volunteers will take you around. So whoever wants to join for this campus tour, most welcome. And there will be also snacks, afternoon snacks after that, served at the auditorium lobby, just like in the morning. So hopefully you will join us for the campus tour. And thank you so much for joining us today. Tomorrow we have another day full of very insightful cases and so many other activities. Hopefully you will join tomorrow with us as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
John, just to say farewell.